The Audio Train programme is supported by the following businesses. Tysers, a leading media insurance company. Prager Metis, an international advisory and accounting firm. Mint & Co., a dynamic legal and business affairs company. And NoteTracks, a platform for audio producers, engineers and collaborators to take notes, get feedback and share projects. Audio Train is part of Audio UK, the trade association for professional audio production companies.
Hello and welcome to today's Audio Train webinar. She Said, They Said is a podcast series produced by Whistledown for the charity Mermaids. That's the charity that supports trans, non-binary and gender-diverse youth and their families. The podcast is presented by Alex and Shivani Dave, and each week they dissect the week's news from government announcements to reality shows, answering listener questions about relationships, politics and gender identity. The Guardian has called it a joyful pod covering everything from pearl clutching to drag names, racism and exams. We're delighted that the whole team is joining us for this special webinar. Our host is the programme's producer, Carrie Morrison, who currently works for Great British Podcasts as an assistant producer and as a presenter for Gadio. At the University of York, Carrie studied theatre, writing, directing and performance and found a path into audio and presenting on radio after being asked to review a local theatre production. Inspired by the burgeoning podcast scene, Carrie got a place at Goldsmiths on the MA in the radio course. Having come out as a non-binary during the lockdown, it became crucial to me to make contact that gave young, disabled and or LGBTQ+ people the representation I never had. And in July last year, Carrie did exactly that in helping to create and then become the producer of the She Said, They Said podcast. Carrie, over to you.
Thank you so much, Caroline. That was such a lovely introduction. Firstly, hello everyone. As mentioned, my name is Carrie Morrison. My pronouns are they/them. And also, as Caroline said, if you have any questions about the show, feel free to plop them in the Q&A bit and we will get to them near the end of the talk. Firstly, we will also go on to the introduction. So I've already introduced myself. Firstly, let's go to Iesha. So tell us about your name, your pronouns, how you worked on the podcast, and your favourite episode. I mean, I know all of our episodes are our favourites, but...
That's going to be hard. Hi, everyone. My name is Iesha, pronouns they, them, and I am the campaigns officer at Mermaids. And I had the extreme delight to be a part of this, helped with getting the guest, looking over the script, and just being a really integral part during the process. My favourite episode has to be with Darkwa. And I think it just had to do with the loads of laughter that happened before and after recording. It was just a delight from beginning to end.
Amazing. I do love that episode as well. So many great conversations were had in that one. Alex, tell us all about yourself.
Hi there, I'm Alex Woolhouse. My pronouns are she and her, and I was one of the presenters for She Said, They Said. I presented it every week with Shivani, and it was literally the most fun, the best part of last summer, absolutely. And my favourite episode was the one with Jamie Windust. I just absolutely loved them, and it was kind of like you said, Iesha. It wasn't just about how good the episode was. It was also about how fun it was to record and get on with them and talk to them. So no, that was my favourite.
Great, sorry. And Shivani, tell all about you as well.
Yeah, I'm a journalist, a broadcaster, and was, doing the presenting of the podcast with Alex. My pronouns are they, them, by the way. And it was a great summer. I had so much fun talking to so many amazing people. I'm going to do that classic thing of it's so hard to pin down one person who was my favourite guest, but I think Yasmin Saman was one of the best people that I got a chance to speak to through the podcast. They're doing amazing work, and it was so great to have someone with a really alternative experience on the queer experience, coming from a sort of punk indie alternative scene.
Amazing. Oh, you said what my favourite episode was going to be. I am going to say my favourite. I do really love the Rowan Ellis episode. I think that's when we really got into our stride. Also, because folks who don't know me, I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons nerd, and that was one of the topics we were discussing, specifically Rowan Ellis's at that time recent video talking about why Dungeons and Dragons is a very great safe space for LGBTQ plus people. So go and listen to all those episodes. Well, all the episodes. Why not? Just listen to all of them. We also have a clip in case people haven't heard the show before, so they can get a feel for the vibe we exude.
Strange, weird creature from another planet.
My parents will be listening to this like, please, no, Alex.
I feel like I need to stand for this one.
Hello, and welcome to She Said, They Said. I'm Alex Woolhouse, and my pronouns are she and her.
And like a samurai about to kill someone, my pronouns are they/them.
That's so good.
My name is Shivani Dave, and this is the podcast from Mermaids where nothing is off the table, but we get to decide what's on it.
Yes, that is correct, Shivani. And on this show, we speak to people across the whole LGBTQ plus spectrum, including trans, non-binary and gender diverse voices, as well as allies, to hear their 2 cents.
Surely it's 2 pennies.
Well, as long as they give their opinion on the news, I don't care about the currency, okay?
With today's guest, I'm sure it's going to be $2,000. See what I did there?
Shivani, is that why you said your favourite episode is the one with Yasmin Saman? Because that was the clip we picked.
No, I genuinely didn't realise that was the clip that had been picked, and I'm so glad that it was chosen to be the clip because it was such a great episode.
Well, of course, and I really felt when I was trying to select a clip to use, I just felt, again, we were in the middle of the series, you got into your stride, and it was a great opportunity to demonstrate Shivani's very terrible puns.
Dad jokes galore right here.
So you just heard one of our intros for the show, and the usual structure would be we would get to know get to know the guest a little bit, and then break down any stories that we felt we wanted to talk about, and then we would do a little bit more of an in-depth interview with the guests to talk about their inspirations and what got them to where they were to today, and then we would have a question from a listener, and that ranged from probably dating advice and also about their gender transition. And then we would finish it off with an affirmation from one of our listeners, or a well-known names, and about how everyone is so wonderful and you are loved and the world will love you back. So that was a feel for the show. So I guess the first thing is talking about how it all began. And I guess firstly, Iesha, as the person from Mermaids, I know you joined. There was sort of an easing process between Andrew, who left in the middle of the series, and you kind of were assisting at the beginning, if I was right, and then you took more of a hold from that perspective. Do you know what Mermaids was looking for and everything like that?
Yeah, I think bearing in mind this is during lockdown, we're still very much a lot of in COVID, and there was so much anti-trans rhetoric going on, and there were so many conversations we were being pulled into. We wanted to extend a space that we can hold conversations that we chose, or that our service users would want to listen to, and kind of create that facilitator space where we had that autonomy over what we wanted to engage in, and extend from us. We have a helpline, we have our social media, but we thought, there needs to be more of a place where we can have more conversation and engagement with those who support us and our service users. And the podcast came up, I think, mid 2020, and the conversation carried on until we were able to establish funding. And then it started in 2021 with getting guests together and reaching out to people and really getting into the feel of how much there was a demand for this kind of space. I do think I don't think mermaids realized the gold that was being created at the time. I think it was, yes, we want to create this space, we want to facilitate it and bring people in, and we'll think it would be really good. But I went way beyond that. I mean, some of the responses we got back about how people found such solace and found not only like representation, but they were able to relate to so many things that was spoken through this podcast. I think it definitely went beyond our wildest dreams, to be honest. It is a legendary piece that we do hope to continue. But yeah, it was created out of a need for a safer space to hold conversation and to be a part of a community.
100%. It's definitely one of the best projects I've ever done in terms of, in my heart, it has a stake in it. And I remember I just left my master's course in radio, as Caroline said, and I was doing that graduate thing of like, I need a job. And I managed to contact David Prest from Whistledown asking, are there any jobs going? And he said, no, but I can forward you on to Kate Holland, who is our executive producer for the show. And we hit it off. I remember being in a car in Kidderminster on a different shoot. And we just, even then, I was so stressed from it all. But once we got talking, we just really hit it off. And she said she was working on a pitch for Mermaids. And I was like, oh my God, that's like the dream first gig. So we managed to put something together and send that off. And I guess, Iesha, I don't know how much of our pitch that you saw, but what was it, from what you know, what was it about the pitch that Mermaids liked, or how much did it connect with what you had in mind?
I think the biggest thing that struck a chord was like, the fact that we get to decide what stays on the table. Just hearing that, like, we are choosing what we want to engage in. We are choosing what we want to talk about. That was a really big thing for us at that time, because there were so many conversations we were being pulled into, newspapers coming left, right, and center, and statements we were having to give that maybe we didn't want to, but because of who we are, we had to. So to have a space where we get to choose the conversations, what we want to give, I think was a really beautiful thing and something that we definitely needed.
100%. And I guess then that next step was casting, and that was a very interesting time. We tried loads of different combinations. I found out about Shivani through a friend of mine on my master's course, and once I got talking with Shivani, absolutely fell in love with you, and knew we wanted you as one of the first halves of our hosting. And then Andrew recommended Alex because she had experience in podcasting and just had a really amazing personality. And I was like, okay, cool. And I guess starting with Shivani, what was in your mind when you were first approached and through the casting process? What were your thoughts behind it?
I was in a space in my career at the time where I was really trying to choose and curate the projects that I worked on. I'd worked for a number of organisations before that and kind of got sick of making stuff for other people that I wasn't 100% passionate about. It was basically burnout. I was working through the pandemic and it was really difficult to keep up that pace of what I was doing. So I took some time to actually focus on what I wanted to do, and being non-binary and really supporting Mermaids throughout my whole time of ever knowing they existed as a charity. I got an email which I thought was a complete scam, and I'm really glad that it wasn't a scam. It was really interesting to sort of see how that how it all came together. I know that there were a few different people considered in the casting process, and I just thought, I have to do this. It has to be me, because I love the charity. I love the work that they do. And the connecting with the trans and non-binary community is so important to me in what I do anyway, separately from work. It was sort of like the merging of my two passions almost.
Amazing. And yeah, Alex, same question for you. What were you thinking in the lead up to your, was it first and only audition that you did?
Yeah, it was actually. I mean, before I auditioned, to be fair, I actually had two kind of auditions.
Okay.
Before I, was even approached about auditioning, I first of all did it, was involved in the podcast because I am a member of the legal team at Mermaids, and so I was reviewing the contract with Whistledown from a legal perspective and kind of like looking at that and marking it up. So that was like the first way I dealt with it. And then we have a group at Mermaids that is for the trans and non-binary staff. And on that, they were kind of talking about the different people that they had auditioned, and there was kind of debate whether to go for, two non-binary people, to trans trans-binary people, like, what that kind of was like, and what our thoughts were. And I kind of said, I think it's it's so important to have non-binary voices. It's over 50% of trans people are now non-binary, and so that was really key. But I thought that the kind of trans-binary experience that I had was quite different from that, and so I kind of said, I think there needs to be a balance, really, as much as there can be. And then Andrew, who was the head of communications at the time, was like, asked me to audition. And then I met Shivani over Zoom. So yeah, it was really fun.
And it was magical. There are still moments in that first meeting between you two that really stick in my mind. Primarily the Percy Pigs thing. And I'm so sad we never recorded it, and it can't be like a secret bonus episode to get like, oh, this was the magical beginnings. Well, what do you guys remember from that first meeting? Alex, I'll start with you.
That it was actually so easy to talk to Shivani, and it was really kind of nice. Like we were just put in a Zoom room with two producers listening. I can't remember for the life of me who they were.
They were me and Kate.
Carrie was one of them.
Right, okay, you and Kate.
I was one of them.
Awkward. Well, no, the reason why I can't remember is because you had your cameras off and you were just listening to us.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
We were just like kind of like told to chat, and so like we just started talking, and at the time it was the whole debacle of Colin the Caterpillar versus someone else, the Caterpillar, Connie the Caterpillar,
Cuthbert, yeah,
right. And then we just started talking about that, and then we got onto Percy Pigs, and it was just so easy to talk to Shiv. And like that's like one of the really nice things about it is like I've got like new friends out of doing the podcast, and Shivani's like 100% one of them. So yeah. What about you, Shiv? What do you remember from seeing me for the first time?
Firstly, what you were saying about having trans, binary and non-binary experiences, I thought was really important to have as well, because I've learned so much from you. That first time that we met, I thought we would never get on because you said you didn't like Percy Pigs. And then we worked out that it's more about the fact that Alex doesn't like Big Percy, as in the conglomerate of Percy Pig merchandise that is sold. But if M&S wants to sponsor us, I'm sure we can change her mind.
100%.
100%. I think, it was one of those experiences where it was really awkward at first and really weird to have people just listen to our conversation and put us in a Zoom room, and we didn't even get to see each other in real life. I had no idea how much taller than me you would be. Otherwise, I would never have done this podcast, because the photos, I'm just looking like a tiny, tiny human. But it was really exciting to meet you virtually. And then I think the first time we met was when we had the cover art for the photo taken. for the podcast taken, and I was like, it just clicked almost immediately with us.
Yeah, and that was so. I think yes, as well as the Percy Pig debacle. One of the moments that really stood out for me, because I think also at that time there was new legislation about it was something like buildings couldn't have only gender neutral toilets or something like that, and we wanted to put a more political topic in there, because it's nice to have like the Percy Pig argument, but we also want to come to the heart of things happening in the world that were affecting trans and non-binary youth. And initially, when Kate and I came up with that, we were like, it's probably going to be a bit echo chambery. But actually, you two, like, you were disagreeing, but you were having a very civilized conversation, and you were very happy to share your personal experiences, and that I really liked that, because I think there's not a lot of spaces anymore where people can just disagree but still be very civil about it, and you still came away with it with an open heart towards each other, which I really loved. And that was something I really wanted for the show as well, that, you know, it wasn't going to be this constant echo chamber. It was going to be proper conversations, and we'd hear different points of view. So yeah, I'm now just interested, how did Shivani, I'll ask you first, how did you react when we offered you to do the show?
I think it was the most excited I've ever been.
Wow.
I've worked, like, I've presented on Radio 1, I've made a podcast for The Guardian, I've presented like numerous shows on the BBC, like loads of different places, and this was the most excited I'd been because it was so close to my heart. I thought it was such a vital podcast, such a vital conversation. The sort of curation of the news and the way that these topics are approached was really important to me, because I think, you know, if we are getting our news from Twitter, it can A, be an echo chamber, but B, you're just reading what an algorithm tells you to read. And I remember we got to choose our own stories each week, Alex and I, and I was always choosing science stories, having got a physics background. And I imagine some of the stuff that I was talking about would be the kinds of things that Alex would have never seen on Twitter or read about on, you know, whatever news website she uses. And Alex brought stories that I would never have thought to ever think about more than for 2 seconds, like often about fashion. It was really important to have those conversations. And in that moment, when I was first offered the sort of presenting gig, I was so excited, because I thought it would be like that, and it was like that, but also so much better.
Alex, but did you get any insight as to whether you'd find out soon, or like, I feel like you have secret intel now?
I'm not sure. When I think I got told that I knew before that it was like, I knew that it was Shivani, that Shivani got it. But after
you could have told me.
I was just like, well, I didn't know you then. I didn't know you. But after I got it, I was like, you know, Shivani says it was, you know, the most excited they'd ever been. For me, I was just like, well, yeah, obviously I got it. I absolutely smashed the audition. Like, obviously. We talked about Percy Pigs. Like, yeah, I did my whole bit on Percy Pigs.
Classic Alex with her exuding confidence. We love it here.
I was just like, yeah, okay. I was like, cool. But I don't think I really appreciated like how big of a deal it was. Like, I had my own podcast, which was kind of, it feels like you're kind of shouting into an echo chamber, not an echo chamber, shouting into nothingness. Like, you just, you know, you've just got a microphone and your own thoughts. Whereas this actually was so different, because it was kind of in real time. It was week by week that it was recorded. And with real life interviewees in front of us, we were responding to things. It felt really current, and it felt really important. It felt like something that people were responding to. And I didn't kind of realize that it was going to be, you know, it would lead to so many other incredible things. So yeah, had I known that at the time, I'd have been way more gassed. But I was just kind of like, well, yeah, obviously I'm doing the podcast. Like, yeah, I'm sick, I can talk.
Just took it in your stride. We love it.
I know.
Just fantastic. So then when we come to actually, making the show, and when we were selecting guests, we were constantly thinking about bringing diverse voices, but also voices that have a big platform. And I guess I want to ask, like, what do we think about that balance? Because to be honest, it felt quite easy for me and Ellie and Kate, and also you guys' input as well on guests. It felt quite easy for us to find voices that have a big platform, but also were diverse in their backgrounds and their gender identity and all of that. But it seems like mainstream platforms are only just starting to work it out. So, Iesha, I'll ask you first. What do you think about that balance? How did you find that?
I think the balance just speaks of the makeup of the team. And that's where it always comes back to. Like, if the makeup of the team is diverse, what you produce, the conversations that you have, it's going to reflect that. And that's very much reflected in the guests that we have and the guests that we will continue to have. Sorry, I hope that wasn't too short, but that's just...
I mean, it was brilliantly put. I have no complaints. Shivani, what do you think?
Yeah, echoing exactly what Iesha said. It was a diverse team who all had different backgrounds, and there were so many people out there from all sorts of communities with all sorts of backgrounds that it's ridiculous that people seem to think it's so hard to make things diverse.
Yeah. Alex, do you want to... Is there anything else you'd like to add to that, or is it another echo? I know we just said we avoid echo chambers, and now we're just echoing each other.
No, I mean, I know, but it was really great, but I don't feel like it was overly purposeful. I think like kind of Shivani and Iesha said, it's natural because we were all diverse. We're a diverse group of people, but. Yeah, it definitely wasn't right. This week we want a gay man. Next week we want a non-binary person who was, assigned male at birth, or and this week we wanted a person of colour. It was just it was a lot more organic than that. And the conversations that we wanted to have, and the people that we wanted to have on are complex people, like as people are. There wasn't that kind of tick box, because quite often there were so many intersecting identities that they have, and we might not even discuss that as well. I think that was really good that as soon as we had a person of colour on, we weren't expecting them to talk on their experience as a person of colour. We were asking about their experience as a person, and I think that again is so much better than if I do say so ourselves, so much better than a lot of the conversations that are happening nowadays. You get one person of colour, and that's all that they're asked to speak about is their experience of racism. And I think our conversations were a lot more kind of developed than that. That obviously racism or transphobia were affecting these people and affecting their viewpoints, but we weren't just asking for that one viewpoint. We were asking about the world, and I think that was so much better.
Yeah,
we definitely wanted. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I think we did and this is from everyone, like literally everyone here, everyone behind the scenes. We did such a wonderful job at creating a space where people can bring their whole selves and really exist in their wholeness. And I thought that it was just, that was so beautiful.
Yeah, I think that really added to, I think specifically for me in general, like working behind the scenes, I really valued other people's input for the stories. I mean, Alex and Shivani, you've already, and Iesha as well, we've talked about what you thought about the stories, things that we wanted to talk about. But I also valued input in the guests as well, because the last thing I wanted to do was talk about, for example, a piece of law legislation that has a very transphobic rhetoric, and that could trigger the guest and that make them very uncomfortable and feel very shut out of the conversation. So I feel like having a safe space, which I know is part of the title of the show, but that's also why I wanted to mention it. Safe spaces are so important. Yeah, we all had a hand in selecting what topics we wanted to talk about. I know we talked about science and fashion, but with maybe the more of the deeper conversations, what kind of topics did we want to talk about? Shivani, I'll start with you.
I think obviously this being a podcast on mermaids, having two trans hosts, and trans issues, transness is going to come up. And that was a huge thing because obviously at the time when we were recording the podcast and now, the way trans people are represented and talked about in the media comes from a place, I think, of a lot of ignorance and a lot of fear-mongering. And that was something that was definitely a big topic that we wanted to try and confront with this podcast. And having two people who were in front of the mic every single week who could guide you through that by having lived experience, by being aware of what's going on in the world around them, was really beneficial. Also having a team that comprised of lots of trans and non-binary people meant that these kinds of topics and these kinds of conversations came from a place of a certain level of elevation in understanding, where we didn't sit down every week and say, this is the podcast for Mermaids, a charity that supports trans, non-binary and gender diverse young people, and then go on to explain what trans, non-binary and gender diverse people are or who they are. It came from a place of, yeah, we know that these people are part of our community and we're going to speak directly to them. And that I think was one of the major motivations behind the podcast.
Yeah, 100%. Alex, what did you have any thought about the kind of topics you wanted to talk about?
For me, I wanted to talk about the things that I was reading and consuming that, and I wanted to give a kind of take on it that was trans focused and that wasn't about this kind of fear mongering that we're talking about, or coming from a place of prejudice. And it's something that Mermaids tries and does anyway, is cut through the noise and give, what is actually happening. In particular, at the time, it was over summer, and there was the big thing that J.K. Rowling wrote, and, Mermaids wanted to speak about it. We wanted, as a podcast, to talk about that and to respond and explain why, what we thought, what I certainly thought about some of the things that she said. And I think that was really important for me. It felt like I actually was listened to, as well as doing something, saying something important to be listened to. It also was good for my kind of, it felt like I could respond to it in a way that was proportionate and that was factual, and not based in fear, which I think like a lot of anti-trans sentiment definitely is. So that's kind of what I was thinking when I was bringing stories or bringing what I kind of wanted to say on it. But also I wanted it to be fun. I feel like so much of the time when trans people are spoken to and they're speaking, it's so focused on like all the negative stuff, whereas I kind of just wanted to talk about Love Island and Kristen Stewart and yeah, I've got to talk about J.K. Rowling because she wanted to talk about us, but also I wanted to talk about fun things. I wanted to talk about Love Island.
That is completely valid,
It sounds like you still want to talk about Love Island.
I always want to talk about Love Island. I always do. I'll always talk about it.
Amazing.
That is a Love Island water bottle, I may say. I'm sure it is.
It's a similar vibe. It's not branded, but it's the same. Sad. It's the same straw mechanism. It's really good.
Yeah, Iesha, I know as well as Alex, you were coming from, well, maybe not so much from Alex, like coming from a perspective of mermaids and having that navigation. What was there any kind of we want to save this reaction for the podcast, or was it more like what was the integration like for between mermaids and the podcast? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think I get the gist of it. You
Okay,
know
yeah.
what? I'll be honest. I really do feel like Mermaids was kind of like, we want to create this platform to center transgender diverse experiences, and then just took a bit of a step away and allowed us who were part of the team to really take reins. And I think that's what resulted in such creating such a magnificent podcast. There wasn't too much, oh, strict, this has to be that way, that has to be that way. It was kind of like, no, we're just going to let it be. And I think, yeah, because of that is what we have, why we have what we have today. There wasn't too much strict guidelines or restrictions about what to talk about. It was just, we wanted that space. We wanted to facilitate a space where whatever was happening, whatever wanted to be talked about, got to be spoken about. So it's kind of hands off, which I know sounds strange, but it really was. And I think that comes from the trust that, Mermaids had in the team. And, with, myself and Alex and Andrew at the time being a part of it, they really trusted us to create what we created.
That was really lovely. I think one more question before we go into the Q&A. I'll start with Alex first. What were the moments that have stayed with you? Whether it's because it was really funny, I mean, a lot of it was funny, so how can you possibly choose? Or it was heartwarming. What are the moments that have stayed with you?
I think what stayed with me is like my relationship with Shivani and with the team. And I think at first I wasn't hopeless. Hopeless is too strong a word, but it was very different going from kind of, following a vague script and having little lines that you have to get in and interview someone. That was like a very new skill. And I certainly learned a lot from the experience and from Shivani and from you, Carrie, like 100%. And it definitely made me like, a better kind of, talker, a broadcaster by the end of it. But I think, yeah, so definitely my kind of relationship with Shivani and the team, like that absolutely stays with me. But yeah, it was just the fact that it was actually so fun. It was so fun every Thursday to kind of bunk off work early and go and chat to random people and chat to, the most famous people that I have met ever, who have humongous platforms, and just sit in a room with them and chat about completely random things. And it was just amazing, like making them laugh and laughing at them and having kind of those relationships with them. It was just wonderful, really. Yeah, and now I know who Dan Howell is, which is lovely. I didn't know who he was.
That was so funny. Like, I was such a Dan Howell fan. I was so giddy the entire day, and you didn't know who he was. And I don't think you fully grasped how big he was until someone on Twitter took the photo of me and Dan and used it as their profile picture. I mean, that freaked me out as well, but I felt like that was a big eye opener for us all. Shivani, what about you?
Yeah, I feel like the podcast helped me create like friendships with the whole team involved and Alex, because she name checked me a few times, so I'll name check her back. I think it was fascinating to also get to hear about some of the guests and what they're up to. Like some people that we spoke to have massive online social media presence, and it's easy to think, oh, they take photos in their bedroom and they have really interesting things to say in the captions, but it was a deeper understanding of what all of these people who are sort of leaders in our community are doing behind the scenes to help our community and advance our community, but also to chat to them about what their interests are, what their hobbies are, what their passions are. and talk to them about so much more than their trans experience. It was so great to be able to do that. Also, the pizza after recording was awesome every single week, which I loved.
Stunning. Amazing. Yes, massive memories. And lastly, Iesha, what about you?
Where do I start? I mean, once again, the context, I'm based in Liverpool and this was shot. This was not shot. This was recorded in London. So every Thursday at 5 a.m., I would get up to get a train for 6 a.m. to be
That's
in the
disgusting.
office.
I'm sorry.
To be in the office to then record later on in the day. And you know what? I don't regret it one bit. Like Thursdays were my most exciting and exhausting days. I get, the relationship within the team and just I've never, done this before. Like you never know what you can do until you do it. And it was really pushing up a lot of boundaries within myself and seeing the potential that I had to create and to be a part of something like this. But I think my favorite part of it all, I would say, is the ad libs. Like, so after every episode, it'd be like a minute or two of Shivani and Alex just saying like really just like random words. Like, I don't know, what was it? Can you give us a little experience, please, Alex and Shivani?
I have no idea what you're talking about. We were always very professional.
So the fillers of the episode.
Yeah, no. I know what you're talking about. The fillers, just kind of things that we'd say out of context, mispronunciations, funny phrases. A lot of the time, it would be Alex sort of telling me to stop with another pun. Also, I forgot to mention, I really loved writing a little jingle for the Ask Alex section every single week.
They were really varying degrees of quality, I must say.
Yeah. I think they started on a high and then I sort of used up all of my jingle writing abilities by the end.
We're hoping in future that...
Yeah, a guest came in. There was a guest that came in and did the jingle, and you got your jush back. I think you hit a low, and a guest came in, and then you were like back at it again.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to stop it there. Caroline, I am excited for the questions.
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, the fun of it really, really comes across. And we have had a fair few questions come in, so I wanted to make sure we got through a range of them. I would say this first one probably is for Iesha. How did you identify that it was an audience for the podcast? Did you commission research or was it more anecdotal?
It was more of the latter. I think we have weekly or bi-weekly youth groups, and just what was going on in the news and the conversations that directors were being a part of and listening to other charities and what was going on with them. We just said, you know what, there's a need. There's a need for something that's positive. There's a need for something that's light and funny, but there's also a need for something that it's not the trans community being told what to feel, but a space for them to express how they feel and what's important to them. So yeah, that's kind of how we came about.
And probably a follow-on question from that was, what feedback did you get from the listeners and how did you incorporate that into the show?
I can read some of that. I actually have it here. Sometimes just go back to the reviews. One of them said, as an older gender fluid person, I'm loving the podcast. I've had the pleasure of hearing about other people's history. That hasn't educated me to the diversity of being trans, where I sort of knew this, but had no real world examples. But I also felt a part of something. And that's kind of the feedback that's quite common, of people feeling a part of a community, and also for allies. There were parents or friends or family members who have a family members or non-binary, gender diverse people a part of the family who want to support them, but never really had that real that kind of insight into the lives, into experiences, and them listening to that allowed them to create to deepen their connection with family members or friends. So I think with that feedback moving forward with season 2, which is going to happen, it's just a matter of when, that's going to help us to create, more spaces and, for us to kind of be true to what conversations we're holding, to continue the pattern of centering trans and gender diverse experiences, while also leaving it open for them to bring their whole selves and the intersectionalities of people's lives. I hope that answered the question. I feel like that was quite
No,
a
it
lot.
did. I sort of get the sense of community and support. And was that new news? Did everybody know? Because that is a further question, is what's happening next? Will there be another series? So was that new news that there's going to be a second series, or do you all know that?
No, it's not new news. It's just a matter of when. There's a lot of changes happening in the moment. It's just a matter of when the second season comes. But there's definitely a second season.
Okay, this is probably one for Carrie, but what was your policy for marketing and where did you start? Because obviously it's important to get the word out. So how did you do that?
Yeah, I think that's more for Iesha, because the way how we sort of structured it is that myself, Ellie, the producer, and the exec, Kate Holland, we facilitated the recording, we did all the editing to make sure you had the best podcast in the world, and we felt it was best to have Mermaids use their platform and really boost it through Mermaids, really big megaphone of promotion. So Iesha, sorry, you're being bombarded with questions. What was it from your perspective?
No, that's fine. I mean, bear in mind, I was kind of brought on a bit later. The director of communications, Andrew, kind of dealt with a lot of that. But I think, to be very honest, this first season was very much a trial run. The majority of marketing that did happen was just through our social media, through Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever platforms that we did have. I believe those are the kind of channels that they used. But moving forward to season 2, there'd be a lot more things done differently. Reaching out to news outlets, reaching out to within the charity sector. But yeah, for the first season, I think it was really, to be honest, it was quite organic. It was just the social media platforms that Mermaids has.
And what do you find the most effective platform for marketing?
To be honest, I think it was Twitter, and it was just the fact people can react to things and send, comments and reshare, and share just how they felt about the episode in real time. We felt Twitter was definitely one of the best platforms that we used during the time.
Okay, the next is a question for Alex and Shivani. Did you find yourself developing your characters or acting a role in some way, or was authenticity more important to you? Alex,
Do you want to go first, Alex?
I can answer that. I always feel like I'm kind of doing a character when I'm doing any kind of public facing work, because you amplify parts of your personality that work well either over audio or more visually. And I think I definitely play up to kind of either being a bit of a dumb blonde sometimes, or being very kind of legalistic in the way that I approach responding to things. And I think Shivani and I kind of developed this kind of sibling rivalry type of thing that, definitely was, we're not actually in competition with each other, but, the kind of eye roll that we would have when I would talk about law, or when Shivani would start flirting with one of the guests again. That was definitely something that we built up.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right. Like, I don't think I was putting on a character, but there are certain elements of when you hang around with different people, certain things come up a little bit more. Or, with Alex, it was really easy to laugh and have a good time. And as soon as I realised that she hated my puns, I made more puns. The flirting thing is just who I am. I'm not going to change that. So yeah, I think it was authentic. I think we were both just being who we are. And I think that's partly why people liked us. You know, you asked about what the reviews said. One thing that people commented on a lot was the chemistry between Alex and myself, and I think that came because we were just being ourselves, and we are two people who happened to start off as strangers and have become really good friends since.
Certainly, this is a follow-up question to that, really, based on what you're talking about, chemistry, is someone is asking, are there any do's and don'ts when it comes to doing a podcast that's based on chemistry?
Oh, interesting. I'm going to palm it off. Shivani, what are your do's and don'ts?
I think the important thing is that you can't fake chemistry. You can't pretend to like someone. You can't pretend to
100%.
laugh at someone's jokes. You can't. If you're spending, you know, however long it is every single week in the same room with the same person, you have to like them at least to some degree. You have to want to spend time with them outside of the podcast, because that comes across. I think an audience can tell what's scripted and what's not. They can tell if you've got a good dynamic with your co-host, and that's lots of don'ts. The do would be just like the person that you're actually chatting to and you're with, because then the chemistry will sort of flow.
Yeah, it comes across when two presenters like each other, definitely comes across. Were there any issues that you disagreed on, sort of knotty editorial problems that had to be overcome?
Editorial problems? I don't think we did, actually. I think when we were thinking of stories to do, a lot of the things that, it would more be like disagreeing with how much time we spend to one topic, or we disagreed with what conversation can we have out of them and would they be productive and or funny. There was never really a factor of, I think we were all, like in that instance, we were all kind of like a homogenous entity of like, yeah, these stories work, we can make them work, and we might have backup stories that some stories never made the edit, because we were just like, out of all the contributions that were made to this episode, we felt like this one was the most lacking, it didn't add the most, and all the jokes weren't funny enough to make it light and fun. So that was really it. I don't think there was ever a moment. I think the J.K. Rowling one was one that we had to navigate very hard. But I think that there wasn't a disagreement about that. We were all very much, we want to do the right thing. We want to give it the accurate dissection that it deserves. And it was just a matter of wording it well. But apart from that, we didn't really have any issues with that.
And were there any subjects that were off limits that you wouldn't touch?
I think that was it. Nothing was off the table, but we got to decide what stayed on it.
We always tried to keep it PG, I guess. Like, you know, we were always aware that our listeners were, you know, 18 to 24, probably younger, simply because that's, you know, who Mermaids supports. And so, yeah, I think we always kind of kept that in mind. But yeah, there was nothing particularly off limits. And yeah, kind of as Shivani says, there were some things that I never would have spoken about, or like the Euros and things that I couldn't care less about the football normally. But, you know, we discussed the football because that's what was happening at the time. So yeah, I think there wasn't anything off limits other than, you know, keeping it PG.
You did manage to talk about the Euros. I was just going to say, you did manage to talk about... Oh my God, we're doing it. Shivani, go ahead.
We're doing it. I was going to say, I do distinctly remember one time when I wanted to talk about football and Alex was like, no, it's off the table. So you could say in that regard I was censored, yeah. But everything was sort of fair game.
Let's be honest, Shivani. We took it off the table because every episode, Shivani would come up with an injury. Every time there was time to record, Shivani would limp into it because of playing football. There was an injury, so we never stopped talking about football behind the scenes.
Oh, my tibia is bruised.
Well, I've got one final question for you. Do members of your family listen to the podcast, and what feedback do they give you? Perhaps you could answer that in turn.
I know my parents do. And they actually did say they love the chemistry between Alex and Shivani. They added to the echo chamber in that sense. I think my siblings are like, yeah, well, and then I don't hear anything else. What about everyone else?
My parents listen to like every single second of everything that I do. So yeah, they listen to it, and my mum in particular like really wants to meet Shivani and stuff, thinks they're lovely. So yeah, they enjoyed it, definitely.
Let's make that happen. Are you scared I'm going to flirt with her or something?
Meet the parents episode.
I know you'll flirt with her, so like I'm not
scared. Yeah, my family listen to it as well, and my family also say like very nice things about it. My brother is not part of the LGBTQ plus community in any way, but has shared the podcast with like colleagues, with friends. He's really proud of the fact that the podcast has been made and that I'm a part of it.
Great, that's excellent. Well, thank you very much. And clearly we've got another episode, Meet the Parents. Carrie, I know that you had one final question you wanted to ask everybody, didn't you?
Oh, well, it was just plugs. I'll start. Follow me on Twitter at CarrieJomo. I'm on Instagram at CarrieJmo. And if you want to check out my website, it's carriemorrison.co.uk. Alex, plug your things.
I'm at Alex Woolley on all social media, WOOLLY. Yeah, follow me and keep track of all the random things that I'm doing. Definitely.
Amazing. Shivani, give me the plugs.
Shivani Dave, that's spelled Dave, Shivani Dave, on Twitter, and you can find me on my website, shivanidave.co.uk, and on there are tickets or links to links to where you can buy tickets for my next stand-up gig. So that will be a wild ride.
Exciting. Iesha, what about you?
You can follow Mermaids at Mermaids Gender on Instagram and Mermaids_gender on Twitter to stay tuned.
Well, thank you so much to all of you. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks to Carrie, to Shivani, to Alex and to Iesha. Our next Audio Train webinar is going to be at the end of April, when we're delighted to be welcoming Catherine Kerr of Podcast Pioneers, who'll be hosting a special webinar on producing podcasts for brands. So watch this space for more details, and don't forget to sign up for alerts about our other courses too. Just go to the Audio Train page of the Audio UK website and you'll find the link there. Thanks to everyone, and goodbye.